morning. Welcome to Visionary Aging with About Mary Winters. I am the owner of About Senior Solutions and a gerontologist. We provide resources and advocacy and support for seniors and their families and for professionals as well. So thank you for joining. And we unsuccessfully, or should say I unsuccessfully put a broadcast together this morning that did not actually get recorded. And Pat Kramer is with us today. She is with Writer for Hire. And she graciously is going to jump back onto the show because I didn't record it. And it was a great show. So we're going to redo this information or reset this information. It'll be fresh and new for you. It'll be a second interview for me with Pat, which is really exciting. So really what this program is all about is empowering you with information to support you in your life plan. We think about getting older and we still want to be living. And so we help in assisting with that. Let me do a little something too from our visionary aging planning. We have the way I design a plan or tailor something for someone. It has to be personal to you. So what we do is we look at what are your wishes, what is going to keep you safe, and what kind of budget or financial situation do you have to make all of those dreams of yours come true in your living plan? So there in that little happy, you see that little happy face right there. That is where I'm able to design the plan for you, or my care managers are able to design a plan for you so that you can live as happily and with as much success as possible around you with those to support you, and you can live, will support you to live as independently as possible. It's kind of interesting because we plan for vacations, we plan for weddings, we plan for all sorts of things, but we don't necessarily plan to stay well and independent and thriving and within our own kind of power as we get older. And that's what we're here for you to do. We also, I put a little segment together called Twinkle in Your Wrinkle. So let's see, I might have actually, you know what, I think I discussed those a little bit earlier. So we've got the Twinkle in Your Wrinkle went on our earlier broadcast, but I'm going to just share this little guy with you. Since I was a kid, or actually well, a mom, so probably my 30s, but that's a kid now, kind of. And my friend Karen McCarthy and I used to walk on the beach, and she said, you know, I always look for these heart stones, stones that kind of look like the shape of a heart. So I've done the same thing for probably 20 years or better myself, and found this darling little rock, this stone on the beach that would look like a heart. I know you can tell me if you think it looks like a heart or not, but we added this little phrase on it: make yourself a priority once in a while. It may be hard, but it's necessary. And I want to make sure that, especially if you're a caregiver, that you're taking care of yourself, because you need to make sure you're doing that to take care of anybody else. Our moms know that. All of our moms and dads who are home right now with children and trying to work, my heart goes out to you. I know that's got to be a lot of extra pressure on you, and my heart really, really does go out to you. So now for um, for your viewing pleasure, I am going to invite Pat on with us. Let's see. I think she'll be on in just a second
Hi
here.
there.
How are
Nice
you?
to see you again, Mary.
I know, again, right? But you're actually, it's the first time our viewers have seen you. So, Pat, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, my company is known as Writer for Hire. My website is www.writerpatkramer.com. And my business is really about creating content for whomever needs it. And most of the time it's business oriented, or ghostwriting books, or writing professional articles, or something like web content and blogs. But for seniors, and the part that I really really enthusiastically love doing is writing memoirs for senior members of families, because I love telling history and recording history. And in working with seniors, I get to hear stories that oftentimes they have not shared before.
Yeah.
Um, Now, sometimes they're the same stories that their children have heard before, but other times when I'm interviewing them, I'm asking them for details. And it takes an interviewer to bring out certain elements that they have not shared before. So I'm able to take the time to really focus on them for an hour or two at each sitting to really get the details and ask them additional questions to recreate the full color of what their experience was. And a lot of times it's about their early life. Maybe they came over from another country. They want to talk about their parents and their grandparents. That's history. That's really important information.
And I find it's kind of interesting too, because a cousin of mine, she interviewed my grandparents and typed out what they put together. I've actually gone back to that to pull up clues to find out who extended family members are, because my grandmother mentioned her aunt Bertha and a couple other people, and how they would go visit them on the train over in such and such city. And it's kind of interesting. It really helped to lead me to more information on the family too. And she even described her grandfather. This was a man who went from Kansas out to California many, many times to pick up, I think it was rum and a few other essentials, and come back and forth commodities that he would pick up. It was so interesting. I
Mhm.
would never have known that about him. I would never have known that he was over 6 feet tall. It was, it just was kind of interesting to hear more than just that, you know, that just line of what you see, their birth, death, name. It's really neat to get that warmth.
Right. And those people are long gone. And so the people who remember those people are now aging out. And if someone doesn't sit them down and capture those memories, then you lose your link to the past.
Right.
And so that's why I always hear people coming to me and saying, could you sit down and write my mom or my aunt or some family member's stories, because she's at the beginning stages of dementia and we feel like she's not going to remember much if we continue to wait. And then at other times, I will meet with someone or remotely meet with them via Zoom, and they're very lucid and have very sharp and clear memories, but no one has the time to listen to those stories.
So
So
it's
I
interesting to
love
do
to be
that,
that person.
because we have a journal that we have for our clients. And so it's very, the questions are very deliberate, and their early childhood, their maybe their teenage years into their years after raising a family, what some of their goals were, what things happened in history. And maybe it's an opportunity to sit down and write one thing out, or use it as a way to sit down with family, as a just a dinner conversation. But not everybody's willing to do that. It kind of takes some discipline. And so
Yeah,
it's kind of like
I,
a
I agree.
trainer, maybe, just to get your story written down.
And we have so many distractions nowadays with cell phones that even if the senior already had an audience and someone was sitting there listening to them, someone might get a text in the middle of that and say, sorry, I have to go. And then there's that sense of the senior is feeling rejected because the person didn't value what they were saying enough to stay there and listen. So I allocate specific amounts of time for them, and I don't do anything but listen to them, interview them, ask them questions, and write down what they tell me. And then I rewrite all of it. I put it all together in a story that reads well, makes sense, and is there to remind future generations who this person was.
So, in my first interview with you, or doing a little background check with you, I did not realize with your background what kind of extensive writing and I mean, you could certainly do this show, because you've done lots of broadcasting, right?
Well, I started as a radio news broadcaster, and I did that for nearly 10 years. I worked at 7 different radio stations in that time, all around New England. And I was a reporter, I was a news writer, I was a news broadcaster, and I also produced radio shows. So in that experience, I got a lot of time to interview different types of entities, you might call them, from the King of Sweden at one point to police chiefs. I interviewed actress Ginger Rogers back when she was available to do those interviews. I interviewed a lot of celebrities, but I interviewed a lot of newsmakers. And then I transitioned into writing for print, and I worked for many different types of news papers, magazines, industry publications, including Variety and the LA Business Journal. And then I started my business by working for PR agencies and ad agencies as a content writer. So I started again, so to speak, at these different agencies as a writer, in order to bring my experience to them. And now I have all of that experience that I bring to my clients, 40 years or so of being a writer. So, it's really important, I believe, that people give that time to the people that they love,
Exactly.
because we don't know how, especially with COVID-19, we don't know how much longer we all have. And everything's uncertain, and we want to capture those stories. And most importantly, we want to capture the history that they can tell us about.
Yeah, and I had a really fun experience with you with a client, a mutual client, and she was a young girl, about 8, I think maybe from 8 to 12, when she was interned in, they call them the camps, but they weren't prisoner of war because they weren't prisoners, but they really were like prisoners in these camps, our Japanese Americans. And you were able to sit down with her. And even in my work, I know it's important to sit down and be able to get rapid trust, be able to sit down and allow them to feel comfortable and be listened to, and support them in the process to guide making their day, or making their living experience quality. And you can do that just sitting down with these bits of time that you have with the senior to make them feel comfortable, and trust, the development of trust that you have so rapidly as well, to get their story. And these are intimate moments that you're sharing.
Yeah, and that's part of the situation too, is being able to build rapport right from the beginning of the interview. Um, and I remember that lovely woman, Dorothy. She didn't want to do the interview. She was very suspicious of who had sent me, and within, I want to say, 10 to 15 minutes, she was beginning to enjoy the process and to relax and enjoy sitting back and telling her story. And it was very successful. We did she and I did 3 interviews. And then the family members were really happy with the story that she told me, which was full of detail about those years in the internment camp, where she had absolutely refused to discuss it with her children, her 3 children, while they were growing up, wouldn't tell them anything about it. And she was willing to tell me because it was so personal to her, but it was also painful. And she didn't want to re experience those memories. But when she was telling me, she didn't have that fear of her children. How are her children going to react? Here I am, someone she just met. She was willing to talk about it to me because I was an outside party. And in the process, she gave me a lot of details that we didn't expect about her time there, including crawling under a hole in the fence with her friends and walking to a local store outside the internment camp to buy penny candy, and how much she enjoyed doing that. And so she was a child, and for her, it was a fun experience because she got to meet other kids and play. play with them after school. And what she told me was, before she went to the internment camp, her father made her work in the fields um, from the age of, 5 years old, which sounds really brutal. But that was the way she and her sisters were raised. They were put to work as soon as they were old enough to stand up. And her family had vegetable crops that they grew, and so she didn't get to play with kids after school when she was young. She had to work even as a 5-year-old, and when she went to the internment camp she was freed of that burden, and to her it was fun,
Right.
and no one expected that story.
Yeah. But I think she also realized that as an adult, she realized what the difference was as far as the burden or how that must have felt for her mother. Realizing later how that must have felt for her mother, her teenage sister, how that felt for her. Um,
Yeah, it was a time of captivity, no doubt. She understood that. um, the family ended up settling. Well, they were in an internment camp in Arkansas, but they traveled on a train of some sort to Arkansas from Los Angeles. And prior to traveling on that train, they were interned for, I think she said it was the first month at the
it was at
what is now the
racetrack.
Santa Anita racetrack
I
in
remember that.
Arcadia, where they were
Yeah. They
they
were
were forced to live in stables,
right.
horse stables.
Right, right. I think she thought it was kind of fun because I mean she's a kid, she's 8 years old. It's like, oh, this is kind of different. But of course, I'm sure the adults were terrified. And she said, I remember laying down on the ground, or maybe they had a mattress for them. I can't remember how she described that exactly, but she said she looked at the ceiling and she saw horsehair hanging from the
Yeah,
ceiling. And it wasn't
yeah,
until
I
later on
remember.
that she connected that that was at the racetrack, and it was actually
Yeah.
in the.
So it was painful for her to retell it to
Mhm.
her children because she knew they would be appalled at how they were treated.
Right.
So she never discussed it with them. And they had never heard any of those stories until she sat down with me and I kind of got those stories to come out.
It's pretty amazing. Share your toughest interview, even if it was the King of Sweden. Share your toughest interview with us.
Oh boy. My toughest interview, God, I've interviewed, like I said, over 1,000 people over the years. I think the toughest interview was it was a traumatic situation. It happened in Massachusetts, in Lowell, Massachusetts, and a teenager, a 16-year-old girl, um, got her 15-year-old best friend to agree to a suicide pact.
Oh boy.
And I was the first reporter on the scene after they were discovered. And I had to interview um, members of the police and also family members afterward. And that was very, very tough because of the consequences. These children believed they were going to heaven, and that was their pact that they were going to go to heaven together and be happy. And, you know, they were children.
Yeah.
They didn't understand what they were doing. And unfortunately, that 15, 16, they're still children. They're thinking like children.
Yeah. Sure. Sure is. Well, tell me about another senior. Just one really quick story.
Oh, well, I interviewed a wonderful woman whose family brought me in to do the interview. And this woman actually survived the Cambodian killing fields. And her son brought me in to get her stories. And she was just such a vivacious, wonderful, warm person. And you wonder how someone could not be scarred by an experience that she survived, living in the jungles for 3 years and 7 months, trying to survive with her family with very little food. But the wonderful thing that came out of it was that she told me that after telling me her stories of that experience, that she no longer has nightmares,
Wow.
that For 40 years, she woke up every night in the middle of the night thinking she was back there. And that since she was able to share those stories, um, which she had never told her son before, she now doesn't have to think about it anymore.
That's,
So I was able to give her some relief and allow her to go on with her life and put all of that in the past.
that's amazing. Yeah, I've had some very interesting, very heartfelt scenario situations with some of my clients. Are almost like kind of like bedside confessions that they needed to get off their chest, and it does. It really does make a difference for them moving forward. I see more peace in them, and lot of things people hold inside.
And sometimes the stories aren't that dramatic. They're just about, you know, where they grew up, who they married, what their life was like raising their kids, where they lived, um, when their husband died, what they did after their husband died. So it doesn't have to be dramatic, but it still brings a sense of completion to the person telling the story. And it also gives them a sense that there's some permanency to their life stories, that they won't be forgotten because it's written down. And
Right.
that's really the important thing.
Exactly. And I think everybody's story, I don't care if you were the king of Sweden or a president or some bigwig or a mom of three or somebody who just like to paddle out in the ocean. I love hearing these stories and you put them together so well. Can you give us a couple tips if we wanted to just kind of start some of our own memoirs on our own?
Um, if you're talking about writing a senior's memoir, I would say just be very patient with them. Let them set the pace. If they want to talk for a half hour and then they're tired, don't push them. Um, if they get to a point where they're getting emotional talking about it, don't try to, overwhelm them with, kindness at that point in time and tell them it's okay and all that. Just let them talk. Don't interrupt. Let them go through whatever process they have to go through because it is cleansing for them to go through these emotions. And if you interrupt that process, they don't get to complete it. So just let them do what they need to do while they're talking. They will tell you when they're ready to stop, and they will tell you when they're okay to keep going. Um, but, do it on their terms and just be kind and patient
There you
and
go.
write down what they have to say because it's important to them.
There you go. And then, Pat, one more time, how do people get a hold of you?
My website is www.writerpatkramer.com, which you'll see scrolling along the bottom.
Yeah.
My phone number is 818-353-5699. My email is pat@writerpatkramer.com. And I welcome, your requests for information. I'm not always available by phone because I am a writer and I am working. And when I'm working, I don't pick up the phone if I'm writing because
There you go.
writers don't interrupt that process. It's very important to keep going. But if you email me, I will immediately respond as soon as I'm done with whatever I'm doing. And if you call me, I will try to call you back when I'm available, usually same day, but not necessarily on the weekend.
All right.
So,
Well,
but I love to talk about what I do, and I love to hear about senior stories. And please call me if you have any questions.
thanks a lot, Pat. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Mary. It was good to see you again, and hello, everybody out there. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks for everything you do. Thanks.
Bye bye.
So that was Pat Kramer with Writer for Hire. And if you would even like our journal, please reach out to us at Mary at aboutsenior.solutions.com, or you can reach out to Kathy with a C, Kathy at aboutsenior.solutions.com, or go to our website, aboutsenior.solutions.com, and we'll make that available so you can download that and try some try some questions on for size and see about starting your own memoir or hire somebody to do your memoir. Thank you so much. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I am Mary Winters, a gerontologist with About Senior Solutions, and you are watching Visionary Aging. Thanks so much.